Hey everybody, welcome back to the Maple Grove Scripture Reading Podcast. Today we are in Exodus chapters 35 through 37. We're almost done with the book of Exodus. We've just got today's reading and tomorrow's before we finish it up and move on into Leviticus. Now, in these few chapters, the Israelites are going to start building the tabernacle. The tabernacle is the place where God has promised to dwell among them. Among the Israelites, especially as they are traveling. So it's a tent-like structure. We looked at some of the plans for how they were to build it, and we're going to see some of those repeated today, or if you've already read it, you know that we've already seen this. But this passage highlights three key themes, I think, and there's a theme of generosity, there's a theme of spirit-filled craftsmanship, and of obedience. And as you listen, I want you to ask yourself this question. How is God calling me to use my time, resources, or talents to serve him? All right, let's dive in. So at the start of chapter 35, just the first three verses, the Lord goes over the Sabbath regulations again, basically that they are going to work for 6 days, and on the seventh day, it is to be a holy day, it is to be a day of rest, and they are not to do any work on that day. We continue on where we see Moses telling the Israelites that the Lord has commanded that they are to bring offerings for the construction of the tabernacle, offerings of materials and money and whatever they needed for the construction of the tabernacle. Really just the materials, or a lot of materials. But notice that there is to be an attitude behind their giving. It's to be a good, proper attitude. Like in verse 21, it says, everyone who was willing and whose heart moved them came and brought an offering to the Lord for the work on the tent of meeting, for all its service, and for the sacred garments. And then in verse 29, it says, all the Israelite men and women who were willing brought to the Lord free will offerings for all the work that the Lord through Moses had commanded them to do. So the people gave because their hearts were moved to give. Like, it wasn't a tax or a forced contribution. Like, this was something that was voluntary for them, and it was out of their own generosity for this. And so it always begs the question, like, do we give our time, our energy, our resources freely and joyfully to God's work? Or do we just give because we have to? And sometimes you do have to, like sometimes it is commanded, but really we want to give these things out of a joyful heart. We want to be generous with all of these, the time, energy, and the resources. And we continue on in chapter 35 and into chapter 36, where we're reintroduced to these two craftsmen, Bezalel and Aholiab. And if you remember, we were introduced to them back when God was giving all of the dimensions and the materials for the tabernacle originally. And he said that Bezalel would be filled with the Spirit of God and would work on different areas and have skills for that, and Aholiab would help him. And that continues. And we see that fulfilled really here in Exodus 35:31, where it says that he has filled him with the Spirit of God, with wisdom, with understanding, with knowledge, and with all kinds of skills. And then in verse 34, it says that he's given both him, that's Bezalel, and Aholiab, son of Ahisamach, I think I got that one right, of the tribe of Dan. That one's easy. But the ability to teach others. So it wasn't just that they were going to have the Spirit to be able to do all of these things, or the Spirit was going to enable them to be able to do all of these things. It's that also they were going to be able to teach others to do these things. So it wasn't just about building, though. It was Spirit-empowered service for God's glory. And, you know, what happens when people give generously and use their gifts for God? There's an abundance, an overflow of these things. And that happens here. In chapter 36, verses 5 and 6, it says, the people are bringing more than enough for doing the work of the Lord that the Lord commanded to be done. And then Moses gave an order, and they sent this word throughout the camp. No man or woman is to make anything else as an offering for the sanctuary. And so the people were restrained from bringing more. Like, think about that. They were bringing so much that Moses had to tell them to stop bringing it. What gifts, what skills has God given you? Are you using them for his glory? So then we get into the start of the construction of the tabernacle. So we've got all the materials, they're gathered, the abundance of materials that they had to stop, and the work is beginning. These chapters describe in very much detail how the tabernacle, how its furnishings were made. You had the curtains, you had the frames, you had the Ark of the Covenant, the table for the bread of the presence, the lampstand, the altar of incense. And everything was made exactly as the Lord commanded. Like what you see here in chapter 36 matches up with what we read earlier in Exodus as he described how they were supposed to be made. The people didn't design the tabernacle based on their own ideas. What they did was they followed God's instructions carefully. And, it makes me think about being obedient to the Lord. Like that actually does matter. This is a relatively simple thing because it's just a structure, a building it's a tent structure, but it's still where God was going to be present. And, God's present in your life as well. And so are there areas of your life where you're tempted to do things your own way instead of following God's way? Being obedient to God really does matter. All right, so we're going to wrap up here today. Got 3 key takeaways. Again, want to give with a willing heart because God really does value that generosity that comes from love, not necessarily obligation. You want to use your gifts for God's glories. You serve his kingdom with the talents and the skills that he's given you. And then being obedient to the Lord, following God's instructions. True worship includes obedience. So, how is God calling you to serve him this week? All right, thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a great day. We will see you again tomorrow. God bless.